So it's a
And welcome back, everybody, to the timeline update. We took a short rest, and we are now going to follow through with some of the timeline update questions about the current battle that has been taking place. Just in the break, we actually had a viewer come in and ask us about our global space fleet. We do have a space fleet, a global space fleet. Currently, I think there's about 500 ships, you were saying?
500 battle line defense vessels, or reality altering vessels, or some type of military specific mission operations for said vessels. There are some that are considered transports or freighters, but those are equipped with several different types of remote drive systems, so they can be smuggling vessels. And the vast majority of our secret space fleet is to enforce the ability to smuggle DNA off of our planet, as well as to be a pirate raiding fleet in other parts of the galaxy or universe. So there's an entire human Earth-based species that has access to vessels that are doing things that aren't so positive out there in the universe, and then there are others that are doing positive things because they are following the cookie crumbles that have been set out for the different organizations who are trying to take over different realities in different parts of the galaxies or universe. And our space fleet's initial reason of creation was to be a reality invasion tool, an arm of the military, so that if it needed to invade a reality and take it over from within, that it had the proper equipment to create that process. And that's what our space fleets do. And yes, there are some that are strictly for defense and strictly for offense, but that's looking more at the 3D matrix expression of what military is. Military isn't that. It's its ability to out-incarnate in particular places. You know, when you have limitless energy in your physical body and structure, you don't need to take it with you everywhere because you can manifest it or unmanifest it. Your expression of war or battle is very, very different. It's how fast you can move the conscious minds and collectives to different places so that they can manifest in a reality and begin altering that reality, or warping, or shaping it to their co-creative wills.
So how is that? How is our global space fleet now involved with everything that's going on with these timeline incursions that are attempting to take place?
Well, you have two different ways of seeing it. You have those that are wanting to stay in power, which are the DNA traders, which have the majority of the off-world vessels, and then you have factions within that wants to end that, and then you have other factions which we call the good guys, which are the ones that are working with other species who they also have a space fleet. So you have two. Okay, but they're all created by the same military industrial complex spread throughout the world. So when a vessel is created here on this planet and it ends up leaving this planet and it goes through dimensions or alterations, it's very difficult to discover who created that vessel. Because again, they were created by the same hands, the same minds, the same technological expression at that time. Unless it's a vessel that they have stolen or hijacked or discovered embedded in mountains. Much of Afghanistan and many of Iraq, they were able to recover these vessels that are about 600 feet round. They're similar to a Vimana expression, and these are considered some very, very potent battle-type vessels. They can alter the magnetic composition of a planet so that they can cause earthquakes. They're there to enforce fear as a tool to a population that is in third density, low technology, low spirituality. So these vessels, one or two of them, can enter a biosphere of another planet and wreak absolute havoc on the dream worlds of the people, absolute havoc on the continental makeup of the planet, and create frequency waves that spread through the planet that cause time confusion. That's one example, and the other ones that are specific to causing heavy-duty damage to continental surfaces or underwater structures, type orbital bombardment, or things that are just your straight-up blockade mine. You put it in an area, and this thing is loaded full of multi-dimensional weapons that can create portals into false timelines that as soon as you get near it, it begins projecting at you chronographic or chromatic energies that force you out of the waveform of time in this particular color, which is very detrimental to physical life.
So Would you say that these space fleets and then these underground bases, like the one in, was it Diego Garcia? There was
Diego
that
Garcia.
massive
That is Timeline Control Central. There's 22 million people that live under that base.
So they right now in these days, and that's what we're doing with this timeline update. How active is that, and how is that connected with the global space fleet? Are they separate, or are they kind of separate and together?
Is it a major refitting place when a vessel leaves this reality and goes somewhere else, and it returns? It'll return for being refitted, or it's damaged and they have to do major repairs on it, or it's coming to a scenario where that vessel has done something in the timeline that has caused the metal to begin to refract false time, and they'll need to decommission that vessel and leave it deep underwater in a no sentient expression, and then it'll begin to lose its chronographic expression and return to a natural frequency of time. It's like much like letting an animal rest that's been overworked. You literally let the metal rest for a long enough time, and then the vessel can be brought back into commission. And this was something that many of the original vessels that were built in the 70s and 80s, they weren't massive because they knew they needed to figure out how to calibrate their metal into how much timeline incursions or dimensional drives that they were using. Until they got the right set of metals that fit the human's expression at that time. And then they started making much, much bigger vessels, several hundred feet in diameter or length.
So that's quite a lot on the information. And are these like humans, like people who have just been brought into the military who had sort of like maybe a DNA or some kind of a special thing in their minds that they had a talent, or how do they recruit this human species to these underground things? I mean, that are now active in these days that we're talking about. How many humans are actually involved in this?
About 90 million human beings are aware of the off-world space program, and their awareness means they're a separate part of our reality. That means when they began the initiation process to see if their mind could handle that layer of information, they're brought into their compartmental structures and began training on vessels, and then actually went and saw their first vessel. And from that point, they're tracked and targeted and made sure that they stay within a expression of reality. And everything that they learn about the vessel is being taught them through science, so their own belief system is enhancing it. And it's very easy to control what they see when they actually see technology that's greater. So these particular people, in the 90 plus million, and then at one point there was about 190 million, but they're off-world. So we've got 7.3 billion human beings living here, and another 800 million that live off-world. But that was mostly over the last 16 years that began to occur. There were several planets that were discovered that capitalist expression-wise made very good sense of setting up shop and beginning to build production facilities there, and then bringing workers there, trained workers, that would never really realize that they're on another planet.
So actually a lot of these people don't consciously know that they're on another planet. They just think they're doing a job.
In the original time, yes.
Right.
But as they got to flying these vessels is where they began to realize that there were different hierarchical structures of who knew what. So once you graduated from unknowingness into knowingness, you would never go back into those unknowing scenarios. You always kept moving up.
You could never spread the
because to be out there in the reality altering and the spreading through the universe. It's a very specific DNA technology. So it is very selective. So yes, that does answer. DNA does play a difference.
It does, yeah.
But it's how much the mind and the heart can take.
Right.
So, and that's where the scenario of force super soldiers come in, so that they can go from reality to reality without taking a direct imprint.
So in these timeline updates, I would imagine that a lot of these guys are having a lot of stress, and many that are have been awakened for a long time. And also those that are just awakening. It's actually anybody who can kind of is into that sensory input already now with their brains and their synapses. A lot of them are having severe issues, because this really is one of the most severest incursions or attempted incursions we've had since when? 2002. 2002. That was a really big one as well.
Let me reframe that. Shock and awe. Mission impossible. Mission accomplished. When Bush was on the aircraft carrier going mission accomplished, That was the peak of our propaganda, and that would have been the time frame, that year and a half, that we would have seen more timeline incursions than would have seen in the last 300 years. But that was the shedding of the first layer of sacrificial pawns to see who really had all the aces up their sleeves in this big game of influence in the end. And in that particular time frame, 2001 to 2005, there are a lot of things that hadn't happened yet. There wasn't really a global truth movement by then. There were very few technologies out there like YouTube used in the way it is today that made video sharing. Facebook was not even a scratch on the wall at that point in time. So social media and social engineering has rapidly changed the way we share information. So many of these people that get brought into the programs, they don't have normal lives once they're in, and when they're out, there's no really an out. You get your life pretty much screwed up and put into a society where no one's going to believe that you are an off-world spaceport program. And in fact, if you do an internet search, you can see 2 captains of international space, intergalactic space fleets, giving their whole story. 18-year veterans, 20-year veterans of being in space, commanding a vessel with several hundred people under their command. So this is not uncommon, for in our society, but yet it's not talked about in any of the major news networks, because that would mean disclosure was real and propaganda was false.
And something that might also be happening is, for some of you that have been involved in these things, you might be starting to get flashbacks. You might start to, whatever they've done in your brain so that you've forgotten, you've got that part of amnesia there, you might start to be finding that you're starting to see flashes of this, and it actually was you. And what would you suggest when that happens? I mean, it's pretty hardcore. I mean,
getting back into the seat of your power, which sits in your heart, being able to use conscious breath expression to lower the heart rate, and once again to be able to hear your heart with your own ears in a moment and place of silence. That's basic calibration. Some advanced calibration or recalibration or renewal of spirit is there, where if you got to find something that makes you laugh so hard your sides hurt, because that brings you here in the now, that stops the hourglass restriction of your soul coming into your body to make the experience even more and more rich. And the whole reason they screw your expression of time up is so less and less of your spirit comes in. Your body and mind and I am present need to be calibrated to receive the spirit's expression so that it becomes co-creative of the experience that you're in. And time, when they screw with time, we socially can't agree on what's going on and we're confused. It makes it virtually impossible for the fullness of your spirit to stay within your heart.
And we can help our brothers and sisters that have gone through that. There is a government revocation contract. There is actually a section that we demand that all time travelers be returned to their original timeline.
To their right and perfect timeline.
To their right and perfect timeline. Because this is something that, in the end, we all have to come together. And this is a way that we can do that now. And by doing that, by invocating these things in these contracts, in these revocation contracts, and making sure that you're a sovereign free will being, and stating that your brothers and sisters need to be returned to where they need to be returned to, especially now, whilst everything's trying to jump around in the timelines, I think that would really, really help so many people. A lot of you really sensitive, empathic people, you're picking up on this anyway because you are very strongly connected to the global atmosphere of everything. You're there, and this is a way that you can help yourself as well as all your brothers and sisters, so that they also may find peace. And in doing that, this will really help stop what they're trying to do with the timeline incursions. If we're helping the players that they threw out, we can still help them, because a lot of them are not even aware of what's happening to them.
That's right. So, like we said in one of the earlier segments, is learn to be unpredictable.
Yeah.
That's the way you bring more and more of your sovereign spirit in you, and you are going to the true heart of unpredictability for yourself, so that once again you can claim control of your reality and not allow your social agreement on time to be screwed up to a point where every stoplight means the loss of your job.
I mean, these are such little things that can build up, that can really change your timeline without you even realizing it.
One of the things I'd like to talk about, Natalie had mentioned about a government contract revocation for government. There's other sections there in the military-industrial complex. Money runs our reality, and many people have to get out there and understand that money is what produced these vessels, our money. And there's a $15 trillion price tag per vessel, and have 500 of these vessels. So do the math. That's how much they've raped our generations to be able to build these vessels. And money isn't real, and we have to come to terminology that all of the military-industrial complexes are funding the good guys and the bad guys, and that this game of good and bad has been rigged from the very beginning. And yes, there are people that are on the extremes of good and the extremes of bad, and they're constantly fighting, but those are the puppets, the meat puppets, the shadow puppets, and the players, not the ones that actually control the game. We are the ones that control the game. We are the manifesting, co-creating beings, and they have a technology that makes them manifesting and co-creating with an influence through it, a massive, massive influence that skews their true understanding of how creative they could be. Instead of going through the sacred space programming, they could be told their whole potential, that they could build their own vessel with their own two hands and not have to use this $1 trillion metal, but use your own signature frequency. Because that's ultimately what they discovered about these vessels when they put human beings in them. Until they put a massive human signature frequency in it, these vessels were not very usable. So that military-industrial complex, it is what supports the ability for the negative dimensional beings and aliens to be here. And then you have world projects such as CERN or NOAA or any of the other ones that define our weather as one way, when in fact we know that the math and the science that they're using is absolutely flawed. And to get our political opponents and proponents to begin to speak the same word, that the type of science we're using is not only downright wrong, but it's misleading and deceptive on purpose. And we must take our rhetoric and take it to a whole new level, in which we are going to demand that the truth of science be upheld, so that when 1 + 1 adds up to 2, and it's not saying 1 + 1 adds up to global warming, so there's no ice in Iceland anymore, because that's not adding up anymore. We're seeing record changes in temperature and snowfall and moisture all over the world. They need to begin to admit this at all layers of the governmental expression and begin to house and hold those criminals that are telling us that our weather is one way. Weather is our uncollective consciousness, or that collective consciousness trying to figure out who we are as the uncollective who would receive that weather. And those that receive that weather create an expression over our land that the wind picks up and creates into collective weather patterns. We are that interwoven. In this battle, these wars that we talk about, they are for the control of our spirit and the way our mind interacts with it. And the weather is the key component of how of a unity global species we will be.
So you mentioned CERN. How active is CERN right now? I mean, CERN is one of our biggest time manipulating pieces right now, currently here for time and your whole holographic experience. I mean, what are they currently doing there right now?
There are 633 separate projects at CERN. The big thing is when CERN turns on its Large Hadron Collider and it's generating enough energy to power New York City 50-fold over. Those aren't the ones we need to be worried about. Those when they're trying to deflect something major, they're trying to put a camouflage field around Earth to prevent an invasion. The other projects that are out there are the ones that alter minds, alter soul perceptions, alter contracts, allow artificial intelligence to come in and manage belief systems inside your I am presence without you knowing it. That literally it can an omni-broadcast a sentient, an artificially sentient being that makes sure your belief system stays within tolerance. And then when you go out of your belief system, it begins enforcing negative energy to pound you back into that belief system. So those are the tools of what CERN is. It is the slave driver's toolbox.
So, for example, if you look at a lot of the channeled messages, that was a phenomenon that was being recorded, especially last year. You looked at all the channeled messages, for example, from, let's say, Saint Germain. And you,
or the 15 Saint Germains
or,
out there.
well, yes. And the thing is, you got from all these different channeled beings all over the world in all different languages. It was literally word for word the same thing. How can that be? And that was what started to get me really aware when I started to talk about this with people, because it was literally nearly all exactly word for word, as if they had just heard a tape recording over and over again, a tape recording. And it wasn't just one time, it was every single time.
No, it was live and tailored from them, because that artificial intelligence purpose is to tailor a thing for you.
So that would be a good example of a certain project.
And it has a synopsis, and sometimes these artificial intelligence can predict you so much that they can just teach you by you filling in the blanks, and they know how you're going to fill in the blanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I mean, that would be a good example for people to understand the sort of things that CERN's pushing out there, and some of the other aspects what you were talking about.
One of the other things that CERN, I'm not going to name the particular project, but what it does is it deals with those that are in the elemental realm or psychic realm, people that have a global spiritual agenda. People that are not just your local healers, but people that really do a big change on the land by releasing energy, or so that those people, they're looked at the system very differently, and there's particular projects that target them to make sure that in their perspective no good deed goes unpunished.
Yes.
No good deed goes unpunished. That is how deep this system. So there are projects that are out there to make sure you get at least one whiplash for breaking the rules of the system, even if it's that stoplight that makes you late for work. Somehow, some way, it's going to make sure that you, as a reality modifier, alter, or programmer, are going to notice that it's going to make sure at least it puts a whip mark on your butt.
So this is where I think that willful determination comes in, because in your heart, if you're doing something really where you can feel your heart beating, kind of like what Andrew was explaining before, do what you love doing, do what gives you some real release of endorphins, do what makes you happy. And when you start to do those types of things, you're really more into the flow of it. And when you are so in that, when you are so determined because you know this is the right thing to do, it doesn't matter how many whiplashes you get, you'll just keep going, and it will make you stronger. And you will get the cycles, you will go up and down. And right now, especially in these last couple of days, it's almost like ping pong, especially with those that are really empathic. It's up, it's down, it's left, it's right. You're getting images, you're sure, you're not sure. Everybody around you is not really coping very well. And you can sense that, and as a more awakened person, just really connecting again to your soul and to your heart, knowing what's out there, but also knowing you're here for the experience, and no one should steal that experience from you.
Exactly. Stealing the experience is what this is all about, our awakening experience, where we're coming out of the slumber of 5 separate paradoxes that each are 54 separate million years, where you have done every expression of good, bad, indifferent, neutral, and everything else that we've co-created or procreated with. We're coming out with a tremendous amount of data, an amount of soul information. We need to process it. And there are things that are trying to be impressed on us during this brand new birthing experience into the multidimensional us. And it's time we put the finger high up in the air and say, you're not number one anymore. I'm number one, and we are going to take the power of ourselves, and we are going to be happy in these times, at times where they're going to try to impress upon you fear, envy, jealousy, resentment, hatred, ignorance, and intolerance. And you need none of those expressions as part of your life when you're in yourself and you've counted your own victories and you're about to enter the great sleep. Those things don't matter to you. And we as a species will begin to change our culture one by one, person by person, until we're no longer clawing back, but we're taking truckloads and truckloads with endless amounts of trucks.
It's almost like the proverbial chick that gets born and thinks that the machine is its mother.
Gets going. That's right.
Well, now the chick's awakening, and it realizes that that's a machine, and it's not truly its mother. And this is what's happening now. We need to make sure that the machine does not influence those chicks. We need to make sure that those chicks are awakening, and that the machine turns into our true mother.
That's right. All right, let's break that here.